All right, check this out from Klaus Schwab.
We are at a crossroad. There are so many threats, so many risks, and if we don't get them under control, we risk a kind of explosive situation.
Massive.
Human link. Present.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Through Confusion. Today I'm reacting to Ben Shapiro's take on his episode of Facts on the Great Reset. And I think, just as you heard from Klaus Schwab there a few seconds ago, there's a lot of fear going around in the world. There's a lot of these ideas and new solutions coming out. But it's really interesting. The World Economic Forum has been pushing this idea of the Great Reset for a few years now, building on this idea that things are going downhill and we need a Great Reset. So I want to give you guys a Christian perspective on what that looks like. But just right off the bat, this pushing this fear, we felt it so much in the media these last few years. I know so many people who have completely changed their stance on so many things. They're very fearful in their lives. They're very anxious. And I just think it's contrary to the gospel. The Bible tells us over and over to fear not. I would just want to look through this video. Ben Shapiro dropped some truth bombs about what the Economic Forum is doing, but I think it's good to have a Christian perspective on that. So I'm going to skip a little bit into the video, take you guys to the part where he's talking about the agenda of the World Economic Forum. At the start, he just kind of gives the history. So let's hear what he has to say.
Today. So, what is the broader WEF agenda? In June 2020, in the middle of the COVID-19 global crisis, Schwab wrote a piece on the WEF website. It was titled, "Now is the time for a great reset." In it, he said, quote, "The world must act jointly and swiftly to revamp all aspects of our societies and economies, from education to social contracts and working conditions. Every country, from the United States to China, must participate, and every industry, from oil and gas to tech, must be transformed."
So this is an all-encompassing thing, right? Every industry, every country needs to be involved in this Great Reset. So that's what they're trying to do. And they say we need to hit the reset button, right? We need to change the way we do everything. So what does that actually look like?
In short, we need a great reset of capitalism. We must build entirely new foundations for our economic and social systems. That great reset would require heavy-handed top-down power in pursuit of environmental redistributionism, which would require massive social restructuring. As Schwab himself says, quote, "It's hard to comprehend how the move toward environmental sustainability could take place without a concomitant move toward social sustainability. Social sustainability is, of course, a euphemism for social engineering and the overthrow of market economies.
So basically, this takes away individual responsibility, and it says that the person on the top should be really the authority in everything we do. And not the person on top as God, but the person on top as the World Economic Forum, who's creating these policies, who's telling everybody what to do with their lives.
That's why people like Greta Thunberg show up at Davos to pledge their lives to overthrowing capitalism.
But part of this, right, is what Greta Thunberg is doing right now, is to bring down the trust in the systems that we have already. So you got to really destroy that, break down by retelling history, how things went, to paint all of what we have, the chaos that we have in our world, everything that's going on in a very bad light. But look at history. I think we're at the best time that we've been in the last 2,000 years, right? And so it's not in all of history. This is the most the biggest time that we have human rights, that we have the luxuries we have in our life, the ease of living, the least amount of poverty. That's been gradually decreasing over the last few years. And so to say that all of that is wrong and to paint it in this bad light, I just don't think it's true.
Referred to as normal is an extreme system. It is a system defined by colonialism, imperialism, oppression, and genocide by the so-called global north.
But which
I think what the West has stood for in the past is to stop those things that she said, and that's how we got to the point that we're at today. So the foundation for the World Economic Forum wouldn't even stand without this foundation that it got to.
WEF isn't so clear about is that the Great Reset would involve great suffering, like a lot of suffering. Schwab, in one of his books, quotes a Malaysian businessman and founder of the Global Institute for Tomorrow, named Chandran Nair, who explained, quote, "I think the idea that by 2050, 6 billion Asians can or should aspire to live like Europeans and Americans through a consumption, resource-intense model is essentially a big lie. We can't deal with it through pious statements and market instruments, but with draconian rules."
I think it's so interesting that they bring up this point, because on half the side they're saying that everybody has to increase their standard of life. This is the philanthropist answer, that it's not okay to live like people live in a third world country, which, yes, they have some negative aspects. They don't have the same luxuries that we have, food, resources, clean water, all of those things. Yes, of course we need to bring that up, but they're saying also you can't have this standard of living that you have in the West. We have to bring down the standard of living in the West. We have to put restrictions on things that people can have and restrict your freedoms. You're not actually allowed to be free.
And those rules won't be provided by markets, but only by institutions of society. Call it the state. Lowered living standards enforced by government, hand in glove with corporations. That's the message.
Asian governments need to reject the Western model. They need to move beyond the rhetoric of liberal, democratic, capitalist systems which say that individual rights are sacrosanct.
All of this will usher in what Schwab calls the Fourth Industrial Revolution. According to Schwab, this Fourth Industrial Revolution will be all about integrating into a big data world driven by government and business. It will involve, quote, a fusion of technologies that is blurring the lines between the physical, digital, and biological spheres.
One of the features of this fourth industrial revolution is that it doesn't change what we are doing, but it changes us.
And that, of course, will require even more top-down design and control. So, what will this great reset, this new revolution, look like? Well, it could look like replacement of traditional food sources by, say, alternative protein sources like bugs. The Davos Agenda for 2022 included an article explaining, quote, insects are an excellent alternative source of protein and significantly reduce our carbon footprint. How exciting. It could look like widespread neurotechnological brain enhancements, as Schwab suggests will happen. Or maybe it'll just look like the end of private property ownership altogether. In 2016, the WEF released a video predicting that by 2030, you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. Almost certainly, the new revolution will look like top-down social engineering by the big brains, all in the name of smoothing out the bumps of technological change.
Okay, I think that's enough of the video, but let's break it down a little bit. So the World Economic Forum, they are a group. Ben talks about it earlier in the video, but how they came up with this idea, how they developed, how they got received by all these powerful world leaders and organizations, leaders of organizations. But they've really just developed into this world-changing, unelected group of people that is amassing with all of these philanthropist type personalities. Like Bill Gates is on there, a lot of these other people, very rich people that have ideas to change the world in this way or in that way, which I wouldn't say development is not bad. I think we shouldn't be so conservative in thinking about how we develop, but just think about America, because let's break down this globalist idea. America was built with checks and balances. You learned this in like 5th grade, that we decided that it needs to be built in a way that one person or one group of people cannot have the ultimate authority, right? And that causes a lot of infighting. That causes a lot of seeming instability when you watch the news about America, because this group is fighting against this group, and you see these things happening all the time. But that's how it's supposed to work. You don't want one group of people or one person to have all the power. That's why an election cycle is only 4 years. So it's kind of a weakened system, but it's proved to be very successful. It's proved to bring about a lot of good change and to work against people's evil agendas, which I don't know if you guys have heard the quote that ultimate power absolute power corrupts absolutely. And so if you have this group, this unelected group that's working in the shadows and they're clear about their agenda, this isn't a conspiracy theory. This is, you can go read Klaus Schwab's book about the Great Reset. He has a book, COVID-19, The Great Reset. The point is to use these things, to push fear, to do all these things to create a reset, and the ultimate end to that is whatever these globalists want, their own standard of morality. It's not objective morality, it's whatever they decide is the right thing to do. And I think if we look at the last 200 years of history, this atheistic worldview, it proves devastating when it actually works itself out. Millions of people die whenever these kind of ideas work together. So let's think biblically about this. Let's take it back to the Tower of Babel, right? God divides the languages of the people. He divides them into nations based on their tongues. And he did this for a reason. There's accountability when you have different nations. There's accountability when not one group of people have all the power and they have to answer to the other groups of people. And this is how in ancient times a city and a village would work, right? Because one family, if they do something wrong, all the other families would say, hey, don't do that. In the same way, we have this structure of nations. They're kind of like families. Each nation is a group of people, and they should take care of their own people, just like a family should take care of its own people. Now, if we just brought everything together and said, okay, well, let's break down the family. There's no actual parents. Let's all just be a global nation. Everyone just pool your kids together. We'll teach them all the same thing. Break down the family unit. That's not the way God designed it. That's what they're trying to do with nations. And I think it's going to prove to be catastrophic in the way that you don't have a big brother. You don't have any other person. Like, if America does something wrong today, then they have China and Russia and India and all of these other big nations breathing down their necks. And so they are in check. Now, if all of these nations start working together, then it becomes, there's no accountability. If they become one entity. But you see, like in World War II, right? The Axis power versus the Allies, that world powers say what you're doing is not okay and you cannot dominate everybody. And so that's, I think, how we should look at this globalism idea. I think, one, don't buy into the globalist agenda. It can look good, but I think God created the people's groups and nations not to be fighting against each other, but he holds each one accountable. It says that he's going to judge the nations. He creates the nations. And so I think don't work against that. Of course, work towards unity. Of course, don't be fighting all the time, but keep your national identity. I don't think your national identity is a bad thing, and I don't think that's a racist thing. Of course, those groups that you have are important. And then the second thing I would say, the Bible tells us over and over, don't fear. Don't fear when these things are happening. You can work against it, but don't be afraid. Don't go into chaos. Don't dig your hole. Read Psalms 2. The nations of the world gather themselves against the Lord and against his anointed. But guess what? It says, he who sits on heaven's throne laughs at their plans, that he will cause them to go into confusion, that even if the world plots all these things against God, God is still the one in charge. He's still the one holding these nations accountable. So we don't need to be afraid. But with that being said, don't abdicate your responsibility. God has given you the ability to act. Right now, most of us live in countries where we have the freedom of speech, where we have our freedoms right now. Use those freedoms to continue our freedom. The United States wasn't built without people sacrificing for it, right? People had to die for this. People gave their lives for the freedom that we have. People were fighting against a system that looks kind of a lot like this you will own nothing and be happy system, because people wanted that freedom to worship God. And so don't abdicate your responsibility right now. Use those freedoms. Bring up the conversation at the dining room table. Talk about these issues, because right now you have a say in what goes on. And if enough people fight against from this and shine light on this, then just like the cockroaches flee when you turn on the lights, people like this, they don't want to stay around in the light because they look really, really bad when the light shines on them and people bring them to justice. And so I would say, really fight against it. Don't let this take over. Don't live in fear. But also don't buy into this agenda, what these people are talking. Let me know what you guys think about the World Economic Forum and the Great Reset in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts about it. And yeah, follow up with you guys. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you like the content, like the video, subscribe to the channel to get more of it. God bless you. Have a great week.